Hey, what's going on, guys? Mark with the easiestbusiness.com. Today, I'm going to bring you something I put together throughout the day yesterday and last night. Finished it late last night. Wanted to record it late last night, but I really didn't have an opportunity. I was really tired. It was about 1 a.m. when I finished everything. So I went to sleep and got woke up at 5 a.m. by a tornado warning alarm. But that's beside the point. Today, I'm bringing you a comprehensive paint formula guide for bidding. This is going to have breakdowns of all the major formulas that I use to bid both residential and commercial painting all in one place. I've went over all of these formulas, I believe, in one fashion or another in other videos, but today I'm going to bring it to you in a comprehensive guide. It's going to be all in one place for your reference in the event you ever need to reference any of these things. So this is the comprehensive paint formula guide for bidding by me, of course, Markup from theeasiestbusiness.com. So who am I? For those who don't know me, I'm a former project manager, former estimator for one of the largest commercial outfits in the state of Virginia. We did $13 million a year annually. This didn't include change orders. This didn't include extra work tickets. So we technically did more revenue than that, but we always counted it by the base painting contracts, the work that we bid out and got accepted and moved forward on it. Then any extra money to come from extra work tickets or change orders or anything like that down the road, we didn't really count that. So I myself independently brought over $3 million a year to the company in just base painting contracts. Those are just jobs that I bid solo by myself. I landed them. They were profitable jobs. That's the revenue that I brought in for the company. This included just regular paint work, no residential work. This was just commercial, which also included wall covering. I did material orders. I did change orders, extra work tickets, all those things myself. Dealt with manpower, all that good stuff. And I currently run a small YouTube channel, just hit over 1,000 subscribers. And I provide free education for the most part to painters, as well as I privately coach these painters in my free time. I try to bridge the gap between residential and commercial painters because I saw from the beginning when I created this YouTube channel that, residential painters don't know a lot about the commercial world and it can be scary. So that's where I try to step in and show, hey, I've done residential and commercial. Let me share my side of the commercial world, since that seems to be where most people lack, where most painters lack. Most people are very familiar with the residential process and they're okay with that and they're comfortable with that. But I come in to help you jump over to the commercial world and not be intimidated. What you'll learn in this slideshow, most common formulas that I use or professional contractors use to get the most accurate numbers. They're very basic formulas, but they're very important to know. A detailed explanation of how to accomplish finding the correct numbers to use. So I'm going to give you how you need to know this measurement and this measurement. You put them together. This is what you'll get. This is the square footage of this, whatever. This is the area of this, whatever. You'll learn basically how to find it and what to use to get the formula put together and put to good use. Detailed explanations of why those formulas are used, and then I'll provide graphics and or explanations to accompany all slides or all formulas provided. So there will be a couple of graphics here, one or two I think I put in here. I can't remember. It's all becoming a blur. I stayed up so late doing it. But there's a couple of graphics, mostly are explanations though on why and how to use these formulas. So what you won't learn, first of all, you won't learn how to bid X. So you'll learn how to find, areas and things like that, and how to calculate labor rates and material and all that good stuff. And you put those together to basically figure out how to do it for you. But if you're saying, how much should I charge to paint a door? I'm not going to go over stuff like that. So you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. Or what should I charge for X? Kind of the same question, but I don't know what you should charge. You have to figure that out. That's what this guide's for. You need to sit down and put the work in, put the sweat equity in on the notepad and the calculator and the pencil, and sharpen your pencil and figure out what you need to charge for what. And you will not be learning how to read blueprints. Obviously, that is the only thing that I sell currently on my website. If you want to learn how to read blueprints, I will personally teach you theeasiestbusiness.com/courses. Keep in mind, it is $3,500 for me to teach you, $1,500 if you want the link of me teaching others and me going over how to do it in the course that I made. I believe I have about 15 hours worth of content on there right now. That's increasing with everybody I coach, everybody I sit down and do a Zoom call with. That's $1,500, but you have to self-teach, but the information is all there, all the same. For $3,500, I'll spend 4 or 5 days with you, a week with you, teaching you how to read blueprints. But that's not what you're learning today. So the first thing we're going to go over is finding the wall square footage. Went over this many times in other videos. I actually have a video saying how to find the wall square footage of a room. Hopefully I'm going to break this down in simple fashion here, so it'll be easy if you ever need to reference this. You'll just take a look at this slideshow again, and you'll be able to find out what you need to find out. So finding the wall square footage, in my opinion, is the most important task for somebody who's bidding, especially commercial work. Excuse me. So if you go to find the wall square footage, you can base all of your labor numbers off your wall square footage. What I'm trying to say is not that all labor numbers are the same as your wall square footage labor price, but you can use it as a basis to figure out how to find those other labor prices. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So the easiest way to find wall square footage is to use the perimeter of a room times the ceiling height. So I'll put a graphic in here showing the wall square footage. We have a 10 by 10 room. So all those walls are 10 feet in length. So we would know that the perimeter of this room is 40 feet. Keep that in mind. So in the example shown, the room is square to make understanding the formula easier. 40 feet would be the perimeter of the room, which I just stated. If the ceiling height of this room is 10 foot, that would mean the walls were 10 foot high as well, because your walls can only go as high as your ceiling are, right? They can go above the ceiling in some commercial aspects, but we're talking about drop ceilings, and that is the exception, not the rule. This is the basic rule, though. So if the ceiling height's 10 foot, the walls go up 10 foot high, right? So then if we have 40 feet around, we would multiply 40 times 10, because that is the perimeter, 40 times 10 being the ceiling height, which will give us 400 square feet. We're not going to waste our time taking out for door frames, taking out for doors, windows, anything like that, because that's going to cause a very marginal difference. You may get 50 more bucks out of a room, but if you add 50 bucks to 100 rooms you do, you're going to price yourself out of the bid. Nobody's doing that, or you're going to be way low, rather. Excuse me, price yourself out of the bid wouldn't matter in this case, because you're actually covering that area and not taking out for it. But if you 50 bucks a room, 50 bucks a room for 100 rooms, all of a sudden you got thousands and thousands of dollars that you're leaving on the table that nobody else is taking out for. So we're not going to worry about taking out for windows. We're not going to worry about taking out for door frames, anything like that. But yeah, you plug those numbers in, the perimeter being 40, ceiling height being 10, you'll get 400. So the wall square footage of a 10 by 10 room with 10 foot ceilings is 400 square feet. What can you do with wall square footage? It can be used to calculate exactly how many gallons of paint you need. Like I said before, it helps you set up your base pricing, and your wall square footage is the easiest to calculate off of, because I believe that everything else can be based off of it. And like I said, you'll see what I mean when we go through here. Calculating ceiling square foot and floor square footage. So finding floor square footage and finding ceiling square footage is by far the easiest formula that I'm going to teach you today. The reason being is because both of these formulas are the exact same, and you only need two measurements to figure it out. So the most efficient way to calculate the area of a floor and the area of a ceiling, I'm doing my hand backwards, the area of a ceiling, area of a floor, is you'll need two measurements. You'll need the length of the room and the width of the room. And then once you know the length and the width of the room, if you remember back to what we were taught in middle school, you just do length times width will give you the area of a square, right? So a floor is typically square, sometimes not really. This room included, it's not really square, but it's got a little bit of a tiny little alcove looking thing in it. But for my calculations, if I were to do this room, I would just measure the longest part, including the little, extra foot or two of alcove, and then I would multiply that by the other wall, and then you would have the area. You'd have a little bit extra, but it's always good to round up in estimating rather than round down. So in our example from earlier, if we use that same 10 by 10 room, the width being 10 and the length being 10, we would have a floor area of 100 square feet. And as long as we had flat ceilings in that room, the ceiling would also be 100 square feet. Make sure to remember that that's for a flat ceiling, because that's a caveat to this rule for ceilings. If your ceilings are vaulted, or if you have a ton of soffits, this won't cover everything, but for a majority of the cases that you're going to see, you're going to have flat ceilings in most places that you're painting. Now, if you're painting a big church or something like that, that's a different story, and that's not something that we're going to go over in this video per se. But for flat ceilings, length time width will work, and for floors, length time width will work as well. What can you do with the ceiling and floor square footage? You can calculate ceiling labor and material, which is very important if you're doing a commercial estimate. You're going to have line items for every single substrate that you paint, and you're going to need to know how much you charge for painting ceilings, material costs, things like that, because ceiling paint's very different than wall paint. You know that. You can bid sealed concrete floors now. You can add that into your scope if you don't mind rolling out sealed concrete floors. You can add that in there since now you know how to find the square footage of floors. If you do epoxy, this will help you as well. If you already do epoxy, you probably know how to do this already. But if you want to get into epoxy, square footage of floors is very easy to find. And length time width formula, it also works for walls, anything like that. Length time width is going to be the same. You're just going to use the length of the wall times the height of the wall. It's going to give you the area of a wall. Let's say you had to do, wall covering on an accent wall in a hotel room. Very common thing. You need to know how many square feet are on that wall so you know how much wall covering, material to order. So very useful formula, but very simple one. Calculating paint coverage rates. This is going to be the bread and butter of how you're going to know what to charge for material. So coverage rate, I define, these are all my definitions. These aren't official definitions. This is how I defined it, right? Coverage rate is the square footage that you can get out of a can of paint, out of a gallon of paint, right? Most paints, Benjamin Moore, just standard wall paint, Sherwin-Williams standard wall, Behr standard wall paints, all these companies, most paints will cover between 250 to 400 square feet a gallon of wall space. And that's just what I've seen from reading data sheets over the years. It could vary, here to there, but you need to check your data sheets for whatever product you have using. If you're using, ProMar 200, go to ProMar, type in ProMar 200 into Google, and sure, it'll come up on Sherwin-Williams. You go to the PDS sheets, the data sheets, and it'll show you on the data sheets, coverage amount or coverage rate. And you always want to round down when it comes to coverage rate. So, like I said, it's very product and substrate dependent. Google whatever product that you're using and then Google ProMar 200 data sheet and it'll come up. So there's a website called paintdocs.com that pretty much has every, paint that you could ever imagine on there. And they have the data sheets on there as well. So you don't always need to go to the manufacturer's website. A lot of times external websites will have them as well. So the basic coverage rate formula is wall square footage. So whatever you used earlier, that formula that we used, the perimeter time height, that's how you find your wall square footage. So wall square footage divided by your coverage rate, which can be found on your data sheets, like I said before. And then I give you an example at the bottom here. If you have 10,000 square feet of wall space and your gallon of paint covers 350, but you round it down to 300 because you always want to have a little bit extra and not be short on your estimate. So if your paint can says 350, 375, and you ran out of 300, you would divide your 10,000 feet of wall space by 300 and you would get 33.3. That 33.3, that number is how many gallons of paint you need to cover 10,000 square feet. But you got to remember that's only one coat. So once you get that 33.3 gallons, round up to 34, and then multiply how many gallons you need by how many coats that you quote. So if I had 34 gallons of paint needed to cover 10,000 square feet at one coat, I would need, 68 gallons I would need to order 68 gallons to get two coats on 10,000 square feet of walls. And then if you need three, just add another 33 to that. So it'd be, 90, 102, 101, something like that. Not the best at math, but I'm teaching you guys how to use math, right? But that's pretty simple stuff. You just divide, your wall square footage by your coverage rate. And as long as it's the same material throughout, you'll know exactly how many gallons you need. Excuse me. You know exactly how many gallons you need according to how many coats that you quoted. So calculating labor rates, this is going to be 2 slides, hence the 1 of 2. So labor rate is almost calculated exactly like, it's very similar to material like coverage rate, paint coverage rate. So, I define labor rate as the measure of labor performed in a specified period of time measured in both square footage and monetary value. So to get an accurate labor rate, you need to know how fast you can produce the work, and then you need to know how much that work costs you. And then once you know those two things, you know how fast you perform a set amount of work, not just perform work. Like I can do, whatever. You need to know a specific number rather, of how fast you complete that work and then how much that's going to cost you. So 2 tips I have here: do not base your labor rate off of your fastest worker. That's going to mess you up in the long run because your average is going to be actually lower than that. You're not going to get as much production as you think you'll get done if you base it off of your fastest worker. And it is also imperative that you do not base your labor price or how much you're charging off of your lowest paid employee, because your average is going to be much higher. If you're paying a helper $15 an hour, don't use that as your labor price, because the guys that you're paying 25, 35 bucks an hour is going to bring that number way up, and then you're going to be underbidding stuff. So Consider taking an average or simply basing your labor price off of your highest paid employee while calculating your labor rate off of your lowest producing non-helper. So the basic formula for calculating labor rates is this: amount of production per hour of the desired employee that you chose, as stated earlier, divided by the amount of production that he or she can accomplish. And we'll go into more detail on slide number 2. For example, if you choose a random employee or an average cost, whatever way you want to do it, of $25 an hour, they make $25 an hour, and you had them paint, just an imaginary room that was the same as the example from earlier, 400 square feet of walls, you could likely get at least the first coat put on in an hour's time, all 4 walls, right? Cutting, rolling, everything, whole hour, one guy by himself in a room. This is just a hypothetical situation. This doesn't include any furniture moving, setting up, caulking, spackling, prep, anything. This is just to get your labor rate as far as just charging to cut and roll walls. The basic formula is square footage of production divided by cost it took to produce the work. And then I give an example here. So for $25, it costed the company $25 to send this guy in this room for an hour, right? That's what I'm paying him, so that's what it cost me. So if he painted the 400 square feet of wall space, we would have to take that $25 and divide it by 400 because that's the production that he got done. That would equal 6.25 cents a square foot. And we always want to round up when estimating, so we'll call that 7 cents. And that's labor only, and that's for one coat only. That does not include material. So just like in the material formula from earlier, we must remember that this is per coat as well. So in the hypothetical situation, we would multiply our total square foot price by the number of coats being put on the walls. So if we have 7 cents a square foot, that's for one coat. If we wanted 2 coats, it'd be 14 cents a square foot, and 3 coats would be 21 cents a square foot. And that's only what it costs us. That is not what we are charging to the client. It is costing the company 21 cents a square foot for one employee to paint one coat, or 3 coats rather, on a 400 square foot room. So that kind of gives us a good idea of what we should be looking at as far as our costs go per square foot of wall space, depending on how many coats. And then once you add your margins later, once you add your material in, this number gets way higher. And so then you can really figure out what to charge. Calculating material rates, this is very similar to calculating labor rates as well. So we'll take that hypothetical gallon of paint earlier that gave us 300 actual square feet of coverage, not in the data sheet, but what it actually covered. Once we know the coverage rate of a product, the only thing we need to know after that is how much the product costs us. If I know how much it covers, how much it costs me, once I get those two things, I can figure out how much material is per square foot. For example, let's say that 300 square foot gallon of paint cost us $35. I use 25 on my YouTube channel, and then I get a bunch of comments saying, "Oh, you're an idiot. You know what paint costs $25 an hour anymore." So let's go with $35 an hour, right? Which I was getting super paint for that, which is not a great price, but it's not terrible either. We would simply divide the coverage rate, so our 300, into the cost of the gallon to give us an accurate square footage price for material. So $35 is the cost. Divide that by 300. That's the coverage. That equals 11.6 cents. So that's 12 cents a square foot when rounded up, as discussed earlier in this lesson. So that's only one coat, so don't forget that. And you would need to multiply that number according to how many coats you quoted using the substrate that you're estimating on. So for 2 coats, we'd be at 24 cents. 3 coats, you at 36 cents. Now you can see the number from earlier was like 21 cents for labor, 36 cents for material. So we're already at, 57 cents a square foot in this hypothetical made up scenario. We're already at 51 cents a square foot, and that's not us making an extra dollar. That's not making us profit, no markup, anything like that, which I state here. The numbers don't include any of that yet. So markup and margin, I'm not going to go super deep into markup and margin, and we're almost through with this, but this is where sort of you have to go out on your own, right? So only you know what markup or margin is right for you in your business. I can't sit here and say, you need to mark up your material 25%, your labor, 25%, and your labor 40%, and it'll be perfect for your company. I have different overhead costs than you. Everybody has different overhead costs than you. We pay our employees vastly different across the country. I can't tell you how much to charge for a door frame. I can't tell you how much to charge for baseboards or anything like that. So only you know what's right for you in your business, and you have to sit there with these numbers I've given you, with these formulas I've given you, in which I will continue to give you in the next couple of slides, and you have to figure out what's best for you. There's a large difference between markup and margin. I've had a few people on the channel make that very clear, and I understand that. Markup is a percentage increase relative to the cost of a product. For example, if I wanted to add a 25% markup to a $100 product, I would have to charge $125 when I sold the item. But if I wanted to add a 25% margin to a $100 item, I would have to charge $133.33. As you can see, that's the difference of $8.33 just in a $100 product. So that's quite a bit different as far as, margins versus markup. Margins are, for the same percentage is always going to be higher. So how to figure margin and markup? Markup is easy. Simply multiply whatever the cost of the item is by one dot XX, with the XX being the percentage that you want to mark it up. For example, if I have a $100 item and I want to mark it up to 72%, I want to mark it up 72%, not to 72%. I would take 100 and multiply it by 1.72, which would give me $172. So basically, you just ignore the one. The one just gets you back up to the 100. The decimal is there because everything after the decimal is the percentage that you want to mark it up. And for margins, that's a little bit more than I want to go into on this video. It deals with overhead costs, operational costs, and all that stuff. And I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed in this lesson. It's already getting kind of long. But simply go to the link here. I use omnicalculator.com/finance/margin. Let someone else do the work for you. They have already made a calculator that figures margins. You can just put in your cost, and then you put in your desired margin, and it will tell you exactly how much to charge. So if you say, hey, I got $100 product, I want 50% margins on it, what should I charge? They'll tell you, charge $200. That's 50%. You're making 50% margin. So 50% of your number is profit, basically, at that point. If it costs you $100, you want 50% margins, you need to charge $200. And they'll do it. It works for any percentage. So doesn't matter what it is. Go there, use the tools necessary. We're in 2022, almost 2023 now. Don't be doing everything on pen and paper if you don't have to. When to use markup and margin. Once again, this is completely your choice, but I will briefly explain what I do and what I believe. So I do not add margins to materials, as I believe that will put you over the competitive threshold and take you out of the running to win the contract. Your results may vary from this. Please experiment with your own numbers to figure out what works best for you. Do not rely simply on my word. Markup on materials is fine, and I believe that you probably should. There's been a lot of cases where I haven't added markup to materials, and I've even suggested not to if you really wanted to be competitive in your bid, but it's completely your discretion or not to add them. And in an example I give here, you have to spend time ordering the material, and you have to spend time delivering them to the job site. 10 to 15%, especially in a commercial setting, is typical. So whatever your total material number is, $2,000, multiply it by 1.10 or 1.15, and you'll get your markup on that material just to cover you going to get it, delivering it to the job site, whatever. But don't be surprised when other companies don't mark up their materials, because they got to have it anyway, and they just count that as cost of doing business. They'll make a little bit less money, but they'll land more work that way. So it's completely up to you on what you want to do. If you know you're worth it and you don't want to take, cut any corners or do anything like this to get work, and you only care about getting work that you're going to get at your prices regardless, that's fine. Add the markup in. I don't blame you at all. And then as far as margins go, I always try to get 50% margins on my labor on residential. I believe in most, sections of the country, if you're trying to get 50% margins on labor in big commercial spaces, you're not going to get it. I honestly believe you'll likely get very little jobs at those numbers. When we were doing construction, or commercial construction, paint work, we were always doing about 25 to 35% labor margins in the commercial market, and sometimes we were still high. So commercial is very cutthroat. It's very, it's very competitive, and it's not a race to the bottom, but people definitely cut their numbers to get more jobs. So you make up for having a smaller profit margin by doing a lot more volume. So you may do, 20 houses a year as a small residential painting contractor. Then if you do, if you make a decent amount of money in commercial painting, you may do 50 to 75 jobs a year in commercial, your margins aren't going to be as high, but you're going to make money because you're doing the amount of volume to make up for the lower margins. So, in this last slide, I just have some things to consider. If you're listening to this still, I never mark up lifts or rented equipment due to them being a necessity on some jobs. You will lose jobs by marking up equipment, but like I said, you got to make the phone call to the equipment rental company and schedule when they're going to deliver it, when they're going to pick it up. Maybe you pick up the job, maybe you pick up the rental equipment yourself, put it on a trailer, bring it to the job site. At that point, I would want to mark it up. But if I'm getting it delivered, I'm putting it in the cost of the bid anyway. I'm not marking that up because I don't want to lose a job over, marking up a boom lift or something that I'm going to need anyway. That's just my opinion. You do what you want. Always add extra money in for sundries. A good rule of thumb that I personally like to use is including the cost of brand new sundries on every job, whether I purchase them or not. It doesn't matter. So I like to price new brushes. Let's say you got 5 guys working in your crew. I'll put the price of 5 brushes in, 5 roller naps. I won't worry about the frames. Those last a really long time, or poles. Those should last for years and years. Maybe money for a couple of rolls of plastic, maybe 1 drop claw, something like that, just to add some extra money. You may add $400 or $500 in on a $10,000 job for sundries, and it's not really going to affect you that much because you got to replace those brushes, you got to replace plastic. These are consumables. Tape goes away, things like that. You'll eventually purchase them, and a small cushion's always nice to have when you're dealing with these jobs. And then overhead costs were not calculated in this lesson. Like I've said 100 times before, you have to figure out your expenses and add margin or markup according to what is right for you. So once you get this square footage numbers, let's say it's 50 cents a square foot is what it costs you. You have to go back in and say if 25% of that is labor and 25% of that is material, I'm not going to mark the material up. I'm going to do 50% on the labor. That's going to bring it to 50. Now my number is 75. Now I'm making, if I'm charging 75 cents a square foot, now I'm making 50% margins on my labor, and I'm not marking up my material, and I'm happy with that number. And so that's my number for wall space. And then you can take those production rate figures and all that stuff, and you can now do it, door frames or anything like that. So if I have a gallon of paint, it costs me $25 or $35, and it gets me through 7 door frames. Now I can divide that 25 by 7. Now I have a number per door frame, how much material costs me, and take my labor. A guy, $25 an hour, he can do, 2 door frames, 2 coats a piece. And, so that's $12.50 a door frame plus the material cost. Then I do my markups. Bam. Now I got a price for door frames that I know is profitable. And you can do the same thing with crown molding, base, garage doors, just any, concrete bollards, anything, curbs, line striping. You can take these formulas and literally create unit figure pricing for everything in your arsenal. And now besides reading the blueprints basically and learning what to look for, how to bid commercial jobs like the best of them. So I hope this guide helped you guys out. I hope it's comprehensive. I want you to come back and I want you to reference this guide as many times as you need to. If you forget a formula, write these formulas down, take screenshots, whatever you need to do. Hit me up in the comments below. Let me know if you have any questions. This is my first kind of teaching in this manner. I know I did the free leads guide and stuff like this a while back, but I want to start doing more teaching like this. Let me know what you thought of the format. Subscribe if you haven't already. It took me a while to put this together. Leave me a thumbs up on the video, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks.